Country music has long been defined as a genre of storytelling, but what about the stories that have yet to be told? In an industry that lacks diversity, African American artists are taking center stage, telling their country story, their way. Our Stories Too, a Black History Month special. Our Stories Too, a WSMV4 News Black History Month special, brought to you by Bart Durham Injury Law.
Country music has long been criticized for its lack of diversity.
They just didn't think their fan base would ever accept a black country singer.
In a genre known for storytelling,
there's a lot of young black artists in country music that want to tell country story their way.
What does their way look like?
Every generation has a right to define the music for themselves.
And how will the industry change?
And now we're seeing black artists in country music that are feeling comfortable to be, more outspoken.
Thanks for joining us for Our Stories Too, a WSMV4 Black History Month special. I'm Marius Payton. We start tonight with perhaps one of the most common critiques heard by persons of color working within the country music genre. The music doesn't sound country. But those we spoke with say what's accepted as country music today doesn't sound like country music of decades past, and that's not a bad thing. Breland knows how country music success has been built in the past.
Someone like Garth Brooks is 60 years old and is selling out stadiums right now. You know, he's at the peak of his game 30 years in, right? That's the way that country music is built.
But he's building his career a different way.
You don't have people that look like you that are already listening to the music. You have to try to find a way to bring them in.
With millions of views on TikTok for songs like My Truck.
Don't touch my truck.
Breland says social media is giving him the tools to convince executives that there is a market for his unique sound.
Cross country is my version of my definition of how I would classify my music, because people are like, well, it's not quite country, and I'm like, it is country based, but I'm playing around with elements from other genres, and hopefully in doing so can build some of those bridges.
Bridges like his collaboration with Dierks Bentley for Beers on Me, earning him a gold record touted on a sign outside of his publishing house, Reservoir Media.
In terms of just one song opening a million doors, this one is super special.
And his work with Keith Urban already putting him on display at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. But he says he's still figuring out where he fits in.
There are moments where I definitely feel like I belong when I can be a part of a #1 song, but then I've also played at festivals where I'm looking out into a sea of faces that look nothing like me, and people have Confederate flags and shouting rhetoric that I don't agree with. And those moments are tough.
Country music executives of color like James Marsh says the battle's also on the airwaves.
Dierks and all these other acts, Lady A, and everybody everybody wants to work with Breland. But then all of a sudden, once he puts out a single, it just sounds like a pop act.
Marsh admits there's often a particular but somewhat indescribable sound that makes something feel country.
When they hear a certain texture in the voice, or a certain run in the voice, or a certain inflection in the voice, what is that? It sends up a red flag. It's not country anymore. It's a pop song. It's R&B.
But he hopes social media will help convince more gatekeepers in the industry that the new generation of country listeners wants the evolving sound.
Because I think radio is figuring out, like, man, these guys are discovering this stuff before we do.
As for genre benders like Breland, it helps to have the support of those who've gone before.
Breland's already got a #1.
I had a chance to sit down and talk with Darius Rucker, and I asked him about the up-and-coming minority artists in country music, and he mentioned your name. How does that make you feel, and what do you think about that?
It feels great. What he's done, he may not even know the full extent of what him being in this space represents for a whole generation of people making music.
A generation of musicians and listeners with their own opinions on what makes something country.
I think as the demographics of the listeners continue to shift and evolve, hopefully people will be more open to some of the stuff that I do.
As Breland mentioned, it's those who've gone before that are helping usher in this evolution, like superstar Darius Rucker. We sat down with Rucker to discuss the changes he's seen in the industry throughout his storied career and who he hopes will be the next big superstar of color.
Darius, what was it like for you getting your start in country music?
It was, it was a lot of work. We went to a lot of radio stations, shook a lot of hands, and it was a lot of work. It was a lot of people that were looking at the history of it and saying it wasn't going to work.
But persistence.
Yeah, persistence, and they were great. They was like, we're going to play the song, we'll see what happens. And, I was Don't Think, and it went to #1.
But don't think about it.
There hadn't been anybody look like me on the radio in 25 years or something. So, I think a lot of people were naysayers just because for so long we had been kept out.
From his first single in 2008 to platinum albums, CMA and CMT awards, to even a Grammy, Rucker's face has been at the forefront of the genre. And it's the path that he's paved that made the road a little easier for some of the up-and-coming artists.
You see the Jimmy Allens, the Mickey Guytons, the Brelands, everyone says between Charlie Pride and Darius Rucker, they gave me an opportunity to do what I want to do. How does that make you feel?
I mean, it makes me feel great. Somebody asked me when I first came here and had my first hit if I thought I was changing something. And I said if I could just get an A&R guy to listen to a CD, I've done something. And now we look around and every label out there is looking for, African-American artists because it's changing. They realize that their audience will accept it, not just accept it, but, make superstars out of them.
What does the future look like?
It's awesome. It's already started. With Kane. Kane Brown's going to be playing stadiums soon. Jimmy. You got Chapel Hart. You got, Brittany Spencer. All these great artists that are coming up and getting deals and getting a shot. And it's just going to, I think just with the climate of the music, it's just going to keep getting better and better. And I think it's great.
Darius has achieved one of the top honors in country music, a membership into the Grand Ole Opry. It's something no woman of color has done yet. But we spoke with several artists who are all ready to change that. She's gotten a standing ovation from concert goers at the Ryman, was named among CMT's Next Women of Country in 2022, and even made her Grand Ole Opry debut late last year. Take me back one more night. But don't call Miko Marks an overnight success.
To get here and have to face so many half-empty glasses, it's been challenging, but I just keep going because I love music.
The singer tried to make it in Nashville over a decade ago.
I just had this open slate of, hey, you can sing, they're gonna hear you, and you'll be great. I didn't really know about all the industry in and outs and all the gatekeepers.
Gatekeepers that she and other female artists of color say aren't convinced they fit in the country music genre.
One may get let through the door, but the door isn't wide open, and you may get a seat to the table, but you may not get a plate to eat, if that makes sense.
In fact, there are no women of color in the Country Music Hall of Fame or currently serving as a member of the Grand Ole Opry. And it wasn't until Mickey Guyton was nominated in the 63rd Annual Grammy Awards for Black Like Me that a female artist of color was first nominated in the country category. Warner Music executive James Morris says the fight to hear more women on country music radio has seen progress, and it's time to include more women of color.
They have made a conscious effort to turn on that switch to give Maren Morris, Carrie Underwood, so on, a chance. But we have to do that same thing, turn that switch on for a Madeline Edwards or a Mickey Guyton or whatever.
Female artists say they're constantly pushing back against stereotypes.
We came we wanted to sign up for like open mic night or something, and one of the guy who was like leading it was like, we don't do hip hop and R&B. He was like, we only play country music, and we were like, that's perfect because we're here to sing country music.
Female trio Chapel Hart made a huge splash after singing their song, You Can Have 'Em Jolene, on America's Got Talent. It's a song they believe connects the legacy of country music to what's happening in the genre today.
Yeah, I feel so excited to, writing You Can Have 'Em Jolene. It feels like we're a part of the story of country music, and it's we get to appeal to a different generation.
A generation artists hope can connect with the fresh message they bring.
Up that muddy water,
The younger Nico, who first came to Nashville, didn't have the courage to sing about the subjects and social justice and racial justice and the things that are wrong in our country. At the end of the day, I want to put out music that's meaningful, that can live and stand on its own.
We may be living, you know, an African-American experience, but we have so many people who go, that song touched my heart, that song changed my life. And I think that is the important part of the recipe.
With milestones still left to achieve, these women hope they're the ones that can do it. Charlie Pride, Darius Rucker, two men, African-American men, are members of the Grand Ole Opry.
Yeah.
When is it going to be a woman's turn to get that membership?
Oh, can we go there next, please? There's so many that deserve to be members. And, but I ain't gonna lie, I want to be a member.
Telling a country music story often gets a little help from a songwriter. Coming up, how songwriters of color say they've been received in the industry and why their perspective matters. When you ask people what makes country music, they often point to the storytelling. But those singing the stories aren't always the ones writing the stories. So we sat down with songwriters of color working in country music today to hear their experiences as a minority in the genre. He's the voice behind the voice. That's songwriter Cameron Bedell performing at the Grand Ole Opry alongside up-and-coming country artist Tierra Kennedy. Bedell's called Nashville home for over a decade. What was your welcome like? You know, a black songwriter in Nashville, what was that welcome like?
I'm not sure it was a welcome. It was just a constant like, oh, well, you're not country. I love the way country music is when it's like this, and here's my thing on it.
Yeah.
And that took forever to like get people to understand. And once I found like one or two people who really latched onto it, it really opened the door for me.
Bedell points to the past as evidence that changing people's minds is possible.
You know, they did this with the outlaw country with like Willie Nelson and stuff like that, where they're like, this does not feel like traditional country music. And it's like, well, it's not. It's another form of country music.
He believes part of growing support for the evolving sound is remaining true to the essence of country music in his songwriting.
Country music is about a way of life. It's the way people live. It's the home front. It's mom and dad raising kids, and Jesus on Sundays, and Bud Light on a Friday night. You know,
it's
That's
down
country
home.
Music. It's down home.
It's down home. And if that phrase sounds familiar,
Down home, oh, you don't promise to cook it.
it's because he co-wrote that song Down Home with superstar Jimmy Allen. The song went #1 last year.
When I sent it to Jimmy, he was floored, and then he came in on it with his bass player, and we finished it. He sang the vocal, and he was bawling. It was just such a cool moment. It was just like, it was out of our hands a little bit.
Is it a different vibe when you write with someone of color?
In the room, creating is different. You bond a little bit differently than you do with everybody else. And like I said earlier, I love to push into that, you know, as opposed to just like trying to strip us back of everything.
And it's in those rooms where songwriters of color say change is happening, especially following the death of George Floyd.
And getting to see people who probably didn't think about the plight of Black Americans before that, seeing them actually have the realization of like, oh, there is a problem here. It gave me a lot of hope.
Songwriter Matthew Morrissey says connecting with an audience through emotion also helps change perspective.
Whenever I'm writing, I try and pin down what's the core emotion of the song. So whether it's love or loss or hurt or hope, I think those are universal concepts that no matter what your background, you can dig into.
Bedell doesn't shy away from being different.
I tell him all the time, I'm like, yeah, let's use what I have to offer to push the bar a little bit, because otherwise there's 50, 60, 70, 80 different rooms today with writers in it, and they're all writing very similar songs. You got something different here today, let's use it.
And he just hopes his message and the message of artists of color will be given a chance.
I think it's important for a lot of these young artists to be given shots. Tierra Kennedy is a great example. Brittany Spencer. There's a lot of Breland. There's a lot of young Black artists in country music that want to tell their country story their way.
Coming up, historians weigh in on the impact African Americans have had on country music, and the influence stretches back farther than you may think. If you've listened to the radio, attended the CMAs, or watched any country music awards show, you are well aware of the influx of artists of color now on the country scene. And as we found out, it's just continuing the rich African American influence that made country music what it is today. Nashville is known as the country music capital of the world. It's a place where three chords and the truth can be heard every night on Broadway. The origins of that sound, the distinct toe-tapping picking of the banjo, is what made hillbilly music, or country music, what it is today. And the innovators of that sound may surprise you.
Enslaved, African musicians who really popularized the banjo, in America.
Michael Gray is an executive senior director at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. He tells me the banjo came from Western Africa. Slaves would play the banjo, and the white musicians wanted to play the banjo just like them.
It was just very fluid.
Until it wasn't. In the early 1900s, the country music sound was segregated in its marketing. Whites made and were sold hillbilly music. Blacks made and were sold race records. That started the divide.
A lot of black musicians felt disenfranchised.
But that didn't stop some artists, like D. Ford Bailey. He was a pioneer member of the WSM Grand Ole Opry, appearing on the show from 1927 to 1941. Then there's Charlie Pride. Pride signed to RCA Records in the 1960s, but he wasn't immune to the civil rights movement heating up all across the nation. His first singles sent to the radio stations delivered without the usual publicity photo, and often shocking live audiences when they realized he was black.
Come out of those shadows up in the lights, and the lights hit me, and they said, like turning down the volume. But then I would say, now I realize it's a little unique, me coming up here on a country music show wearing this permanent tan.
Those early contributions from black artists have led to the success of other country music superstars of color and inspiring the next generation.
Every kiss she give me.
Like artist Skylar Anderson.
And I look up to those guys.
Not trying to take over a music genre that doesn't belong to them, but instead going back to their roots.
Say we do Tennessee Whiskey, it's like when we do that song with my band, it probably lasts 6-7 minutes. Like you're in church, like you go to a black folks church, like you're in there forever.
Michael, where would country music be today without that African American influence?
Plain and simple, country music as we know it today would not exist.
From where country music has been to where it's going. Ahead, executives of color within the industry talk about the change they're seeing and what it means for the sound you'll be hearing on your radio. There are a lot of artists that look like us.
Yes.
That suffer those same closed doors and the same obstacles that you've gone through. And now we're seeing a lot of those doors open.
Yes, and I'm very happy to see the doors open, but I also think that the doors need to be open from a ground level, like systemically.
And part of that systematic change artist Miko Marks is talking about comes from within the executive boardrooms within the top country music labels. So we sat down with two executives of color to learn more about what's being done. When country music fans pack arenas, BMI executive Shannon Sanders says there was something missing.
I've always known black people that have loved country music. They've never been marketed to. They've never felt a part of the conversation.
A conversation, Sanders says, has changed following the death of George Floyd.
It made Nashville look at itself in the mirror. Quite honestly, Nashville didn't like everything that it saw.
He says the industry began recognizing a need to have more diverse voices both on stage and behind the scenes.
It made this conversation happen at one time around one topic. And I think that that's where a lot of the power and a lot of the momentum for this movement came from.
That momentum includes an increase in artists of color singing on CMA Fest stages,
drunk on you.
At the Grand Ole Opry.
Miko, what you gonna sing at your Opry debut?
And at the iconic Bluebird Cafe. BMI partnered with the Bluebird Cafe when it reopened after COVID for a monthly Songwriters in the Round series.
With our series, we focused on not only high-level writers, but diversifying the stage of the Bluebird, and it's been tremendously successful.
Success can also be measured by what's going on behind the scenes.
So we have a bunch of our acts like Cole Swindell, we've had Breland perform up here.
James Marsh with Warner Music says many industry leaders like the Grand Ole Opry are hosting diversity and inclusion panels to broaden the voices in the rooms.
You're in those rooms when change is being made.
Yeah, yeah.
How does that make you feel?
If they're trying, then I have to try with them as well.
Both Marsh and Sanders recognize there's more to be done, but they're optimistic about where the industry is headed.
There shouldn't be just one African American or a person of color at my level in country. It should be more. And then I think that will change the culture.
To evolve, I feel like, is to become a better version of a thing. And that's how I see this moment, because we're helping it evolve to a place where more people see themselves reflected in what it is. So I couldn't be more proud of the work that we're doing.
That's going to do it for Our Stories 2, a WSMV4 Black History Month special. You can see more of our coverage of artists of color in country music right now on the WSMV4 app. I'm Marius Payton. Thanks so much for watching.